Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here today by Sean Hyson. Sean, thank you very much for being here, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you, man. Looking forward to it.
Can you give us a quick little intro? I mean, I know you've done a lot of things in the fitness industry and a lot of things in your life, of course, but can you give us a quick little intro of who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, I was a fitness editor for about 20 years. I started at Men's Fitness Magazine in the early 2000s. I was with Muscle and Fitness Magazine. Then I moved to Austin, Texas, where I currently reside, and I was working for Onnit for many years. Joe Rogan was our co-owner for a long time. Alpha Brain was our flagship product. Those ape-faced kettlebells that were so famous for a while, that was us. And I've worked for Men's Health. I've written books and stuff. So I've been in the fitness industry for a long time as a content creator. And recently I've gone out on my own, and now I'm doing online fitness coaching.
Very nice. How did you, this is maybe more of a personal question. I don't know how relevant this is to the listeners, but how did you really start to get into that? Because it seems like early 2000s, the internet, I was only a little kid, but internet wasn't that big of a thing. And so writing articles online, like why, like that must have seemed kind of like, well, what's the point of this? How did you really fall into all that?
I wish I had a better story. I mean, I was just a diehard fitness, meathead kid in college, and so I was really interested in the subject matter. And I set a goal, like I wanted to get into those magazines and be a part of that. And I had a family connection that at the magazine company that just happened to have just bought the Joe Weider titles. They bought Shape and Muscle and Fitness and Men's Fitness, so I was able to leverage that to get in the ground floor as a editorial assistant, my very first job out of college. And I worked my way up from there. And the funny thing about that was at those magazines, I was the only one, ironically, who was really into fitness. Everybody else that I was working with when I was just a young grunt intern basically was they were smokers and drinkers, and they were just sort of professional editors and writers who were happened to find themselves at these fitness magazines for a job. They were just there for the paycheck, and I was the one who had the passion and the interest in the lifestyle. And so I read up on everything, and I got my CSCS, and I sort of climbed the ranks from there. But it was all kind of fortuitous.
For sure, that must have made a gigantic difference when people like you started to get into writing those magazines. Again, a little bit before my time when I would have been reading these things, but from just a regular person, quote unquote, who's just a writer writing about a subject that they don't particularly care about, aren't particularly part of the culture, so to speak, which is a big part of various magazines and various gyms, and especially places like Onnit somewhere that I was lucky enough to visit a few years ago, and that was a really cool experience. But that must have been quite a shift where it was people like you was like, hey, I actually care about this thing. I actually know about this. Like I'm writing about this to help, not just to put out an article because, the CEO or the boss said, hey, we need 5 articles this week, right?
Yeah, I mean that was the challenge. I was, very young and green, and I had been a writing major in college. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't just like I walked in off the street. I did have some rudimentary skills and experience, but I had this tremendous passion for fitness, and I think people, because I was so young, they didn't want to take me seriously. But it was one of those situations where I couldn't be denied. I just kept showing up and learning more, and it was pretty clear after a few months there that I was the only one who was following the diets and the workouts that we were publishing. So maybe, we should trust this guy and let him have a say in what we do going forward.
So from early 2000s to now, give or take 20 years, obviously a lot of different trends, a lot of different things. Technology has changed the way that we communicate and all that stuff. Have you seen any sort of cycles of the trends that come through, be it diet trends or training trends that kind of go in and out of fashion? What is your take on this? Because you've been through a few of them for sure.
Yeah, I mean, low carb is one that keeps coming back, and low carb diets have been around for more than 100 years. It keeps getting repackaged. I think it was starting to lose momentum, and now it's come back as the carnivore diet, which is this probably bigger than it's ever been. Body weight training, functional training, these things, they get rebranded, but the pendulum always swings from side to side in fitness. We go to one extreme and then we overcorrect and go to another. Whereas I'm sure you agree that the real truth, the best possible path, is somewhere in between. It's not no carb or all carb. It's some carbs. It's not just body weight training or just weight training. It's a mix of everything.
It seems to me that the overcorrection is the reason why these things keep getting repackaged, and why each of the trends kind of works at the time where it's being implemented. And a recent example that I can see to sort of paint this picture is where this like high intensity HIT training, Mike Menser only do two sets to maximum, failure and max effort, kind of came in is because during COVID times, like no one really had like high weights. So you couldn't do a set of like 5 or 6. You had to do a set of like 30 because you only had, that 20-pound rusty dumbbell in your garage and you could run, and that was it. And then, so yeah, if you do a period of training of relatively high volume and like lower intensity, well then, yeah, sure, the next thing that's going to help you in the phases of training that we would program in an ideal world anyways would be a phase of higher intensity and like lower volume. And then now we're seeing like running and more cardio kind of things come into play. And so it's like, because we go to one extreme, then the only next thing to do is go to the other extreme instead of just being more balanced. And so it's like we're definitely creating these problems on our own. But I think an continuous overcorrection that you put it is a really good way to think about this.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about people just making the most they can out of one dumbbell. Uh, yeah, I think that I love that you brought up volume because I'm a big fan of that subject. Like, I get very interested in that, and I've done both. I started out with more bodybuilding workouts, higher volume Arnold style stuff, and then I got into the Menser hit thing for a while, and I think the evidence is pretty clear now. It's leaning very strongly in favor of higher volumes. But I think what's cool about the lower volume, the hit approach, is that it gets people focused on progressive overload, which I think often gets very lost when you're getting into high volume routines and just focusing on adding set after set after set. It's a great idea if you've been doing that for a while to come back to just saying, or just asking yourself, what can I get done with one set or two sets? How can I, improve? How can I add weight or reps every week? And just, it's easier to start focusing on that with 1 or 2 sets than it is 4 or 5.
No, so this is going to bridge a gap here. You've been branding yourself, and as you're coming into your own fitness coaching instead of writing for the various publications around this idea of fitness distilled, which I love. And so one thing that I think that it often gets missed, and again, you'll have way more context to apply to this than I do, is that a lot of the research and what's new and what's working gets applied to like very high level lifters. And so if you're talking about specifics of volume or specific loading parameters or specific exercise or things, like, yeah, maybe the research shows that more volume is better. And, we could all agree on that, and that's fine. And, better for what? A separate conversation. But the reality is, when we distill fitness down to the regular average person, like, it doesn't matter. It's like if you're getting, 5% extra hypertrophy gains or whatever, like, who cares? You're so far away from your genetic potential that like basically anything is going to help. And as long as you're moving and exercising, like, it's all fine and good. And so I don't know if you have any more to add to that, but it's like, how do we start to work around just trying to get out of the weeds and get into like, hey, this is what's actually going to work for me. And it doesn't matter if it's maybe not the best thing to do. It's what's best for me. How do we differentiate between those things?
Yeah, 100%. I think you and I want to get as jacked as possible. We love this stuff. We love
Yeah.
being in the weight room, but we are not everybody else. And I think one thing you and I have learned as coaches is that you have to really empathize and step out of yourself and figure out, what does the client want? What do regular people want? Most of them just want to be, a little bit muscular. They want to be functionally strong. They want to be leaner, but they don't want to take it to extremes. They don't want to spend 2 hours in the gym. And if you're doing high volume routines, that's often what it ends up being. So yeah, you have to be able to say that. Yeah, one thing I learned at On It is that not everybody wants to train in the most efficient way. Like, there's a lot of people there who they like dance with kettlebells. They make up their own routines and they're swinging these maces around and doing a lot of stuff that to the outsider looks bizarre. But the point is, like, a lot of these people are ripped anyway because they love doing it. They come in every day. They're doing it consistently because they love it, because it allows them to express themselves. They see exercise as a mode of expression, which is not something I ever really thought of before. So whatever gets people doing things consistently, whether it's optimal or suboptimal from a strength and conditioning textbook standpoint, that's what they should be doing.
Do you think this makes it difficult to coach people sometimes? Because some people want like a systems, like, hey, this is what I do. I give the XYZ exercise to all my clients, versus like, hey, I just give people what they want and what they need, and maybe we'll make some tweaks towards optimization. But like, if that client really hates barbells for some reason, like we'll just never do a barbell lift. Like I'm not going to fight you on whether you need to use a barbell or a dumbbell. Like just get in there and lift and do it intensely. But it makes it hard and probably hard for the average person to think about what is best for me to be doing, because they don't have this Rolodex of all these things in their head to know what all the options are. They're looking for the best, except the best doesn't exist. Or if you ask 10 different people, they'll tell you 10 different things that are the best, right?
Yeah, the best is just whatever you can get up and do every day. That's really it. I mean, unless it's hurting you, I don't think there's any real harm in doing a routine that is, like I said, very suboptimal. As long as you can be consistent with it and you are enjoying it.
Sometimes I also think that the bar is actually pretty low. And let me try and define this a little bit more. We're like, we'll have some crazy physiques and people some crazy expressions of strength and stuff that you see on social media now. It's like, go in an average gym, not that many people can bench press 2 plates, let's say. But you look on social media and it's like, if you're not hitting at least 405, it's like, what do you even lift? It's like, it doesn't even make sense. But that's not realistic. But at the same time, people will say that they want a huge physique, but really they just want to be, to your point earlier, a little bit jacked, a little bit of muscle, move well. But we can take a lot of things from those like kind of high performers, and you spent a lot of time around these people who have incredible physiques, incredible feats of strength and these kind of things. What are some of the lessons, if you can kind of, take a few from these people that like, hey, maybe I don't want to be Arnold and I don't want to, win the Olympia and I don't want to be a competitive powerlifter or whatever, but there are things that these people do that the rest of us can, implement in our life as a regular person. What are some of those things that you've picked up from them over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've interviewed Arnold Schwarzenegger, Hulk Hogan, a bunch of UFC fighters. I think one thing that they all, I would say, have in common is they don't think about it too much. The fitness aspect, they don't overthink it. They just go in and they get the work done. I mean, I think part of that is because a lot of them are so genetically gifted, they never really had to apply a lot of critical thinking to training to get great results, like you and I probably did. But I just there's a I don't want to say there's a virtue in ignorance per se. It's kind of a harsh word, but there's a lot of power in just not overthinking things and just say, this is what I'm going to do today. This is what I'm going to do tomorrow. This is what I'm going to do next week, and just be consistent with it and put the work in and just trust that that's going to get it done. Because Arnold was a very intelligent guy, obviously, but I think looking at his training programs now, there's no real secret sauce to it. There's no great methodology we can pull out of it other than he put in a lot of work over a lot of years.
I think maybe even a more realistic application that someone we'd all know is you walk into any gym and you see that like 60-year-old dude in there, just like he's in there every day and he tries real hard. And if you look at the exercise, you're like, that guy, like, someone's really got to show that guy how to lift with good form. Like, this doesn't look like anything that I see the trainers talk about on Instagram and all this stuff, but the dude is strong and jacked. And you're like, well, yeah, I guess if you just like try really hard for long enough, manage to not get injured, you'll be in a pretty good place. Now, you could be better if you were doing things, more optimal. But again, if you're not trying to be the best in the world, doesn't really matter. So that's a good point, that like this little bit of ignorance that like, hey, this is what I know and I'm just going to do this. Like probably something that we we can all adopt a little bit more of.
Yeah, I mean, I was a big my biggest mistake for a long time was program hopping. You may have been the same way. Like, years ago, at the dawn of the internet and social media, when all this new information was suddenly coming out, we were getting flooded with new ideas. It was so easy and tempting to just jump from one thing to the next. I don't think Arnold and Stallone and Hulk Hogan and those guys did that. They basically stuck with one routine for 20 years and it did fine. You can be your own worst enemy.
Yeah, the information overload is certainly an issue. Like I've got tens of programs of, free programs and with things that I've downloaded from bodybuilding.com and the various other, websites. And it's like, oh, this, so-and-so's arm blaster technique and 6-pack abs and this. And it's like, as a kid and you're learning and you're trying to experiment and try and figure it out. And there's certainly value in that as well. But eventually you got to get to a point where you're not just doing stuff to just try the new things. You have to actually think about what you're doing and learn from it to apply those things rather than just trying the newest thing, where maybe that's the part that's missing is like, there's so much information now, we're beyond the point of just being ignorant. but you have to actually think even more about it, because like, okay, I can try like 15 different things, but eventually I got to pick something that's going to work, and then go there. So how do you help people to navigate all the information on the internet? Like, there's a lot of it. It's difficult to do. Like, what would you say to people who are, hey, like I follow like 17 different people. I read articles. I listen to podcasts. Like, I just don't know what to do for me. Like, how do we help people figure this out?
Yeah, I think simpler is always better, and you got to start with where you're at and what you know. So, you know, I think that people look at these videos of, like you said earlier, these social media superstars doing these, crazy feats of strength, and they want to leap right into that right away. And you don't realize that how that guy got there looked very different than what he's doing right now. You're just seeing his highlight reel. He probably, he's doing, L-sit pull-ups with one arm now, but 10 years ago he started with just inverted rows or dumbbell rows. You got to figure out, you got to reverse engineer it and figure out, well, this is where I want to go, but how do I start today with what I'm capable of now? And yeah, just keep it simple. Like the basic exercises that I know everybody's bored to tears by, those are still the ones that work the best. And if you did nothing else but some kind of row, some kind of press, some kind of squat, some kind of hip hinge, 3-4 days a week for the rest of your life, you die a pretty healthy person.
Damn it, Sean! I thought you were gonna have the secret. I mean, you spend time with Arnold. Like, come on, there's got to be something. It can't just be this simple, right? It's just we say this all the time in the podcast. Like, I wish it was more. I wish it was more.
Well,
But
we
it's
can
not.
go deeper into the weeds on programming if you want, but I think that's a good start.
Yeah, for sure. What are your thoughts on programming? I mean, people program hop, as we know. I think, frankly, a lot of people program hop so much that they don't even follow a program, that they just do whatever. So maybe let's start with like, what is the value in actually just following a program for 4, 6, 8 weeks in a row?
Well, the value in following a program is you're taking out the guesswork. You have something to just commit to and stick with. You're not, like I said before, program hopping and jumping to the next thing, which is just like a baby being dazzled by a jingling set of keys. You don't want to get distracted. So, as far as like the basic tenet of programming, the most important thing to follow, if we're talking hypertrophy, we're talking muscle gain, gaining strength, changing your body, physique transformation, it all comes down to progressive overload. Whatever you're doing, if you can't add a few pounds every couple workouts or go up by one or more reps, there's something wrong. You should be able to do that on a very consistent basis with pretty much every exercise in your workout. And if you're not, then you may be doing too much, or you're just not doing the same exercises often enough. So that's what a lot of these guys have in common. Going back to Arnold and the other great physique idols that we all grew up being inspired by, I think they knew that you had to keep progressing. If you're lifting the same weights today that you were 2 years ago, there's something wrong.
Can you expand on ways to evaluate progressive overload? Because it's a term that I see thrown around a lot as like a, hey, do progressive overload. And to me, the trainer brain goes like, well, like, yeah, obviously, like if you're not doing that, like you're not even training. Like there's not exercises that are good for progressive overload or not good for progressive. Like your entire everything is progressive overload. And if you're not doing that, you're just moving around and exercising, which is all fine and good, but you shouldn't expect to get better. So can you expand on ways that people can evaluate it? Because maybe an example is like on your lateral raises, you're not going to add 5 pounds to your lateral raises every week, right? You're going to add maybe a rep, maybe a half rep, maybe a half a pound. Like, can you just talk about other ways to evaluate it other than just adding more weight?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the two most basic ways, the most important ways, are adding weight and adding reps. Now, in the situation of a lateral raise, you're right. Most people are going to get to a point before too long where the leverages on that exercise are so bad, you can't really add a lot of weight or go up much more. But you can get into fractional plates, like adding on like a magnetic plate that's 1.25 pounds. That'll get you that'll buy you some time. There's ways you can make exercises more difficult without increasing the load, holding pauses at the top, or slowing down the negative. Ways you can get a little bit more out of your technique, making the light weights feel heavier. A lot of people will get into this idea of adding sets, and I do believe that higher volumes are good for growth, but I don't think that adding a set every week or every month is necessarily progressive overload, because it's not really showing you that you've gotten any better. Anybody could rest another 3 minutes and pump out another set. You've got to you've got to maximize what you're doing in your first one or two sets before you get into three or four.
Will you often tweak programming as a way to uh maybe like I don't know what the word is here, but I guess induce, not induce. It's like just what I'm trying to get at is if you change the order of your exercises, if I do my leg raises last instead of second, but I'm doing my leg extensions last instead of second in my workout, for example, um, and I'm doing the same weights and the same reps, but I'm more fatigued, more tired. Like, would you classify that as something that is still progressive overload in that exercise? Like, and this is more of a programming thing, but it's like sometimes you can't necessarily just again add weight in reps, but depending on your program, the amount you're resting, pauses, all these things, would that be something that you'd use as well?
Yes, if you account for fatigue and you're doing the same weight or reps that you did the last time, but the exercise is now, third in your workout, then I would say, yeah, you probably got stronger or you're at least maintaining. So you haven't lost anything with that. That's probably a good sign. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of mixing up the order of the exercise. I try to go to the gym personally at times of the day where I know the gym is going to be fairly empty so that I don't have to compete for equipment. I can do the same exercises in the same order as often as possible. That's the only way you can really be sure that you're progressing. And it drives me crazy if I got to wait, 10 minutes for a guy to finish on the leg extension before I can go and test where I'm at on that. You have to be able to adapt, and conditions are not going to be perfect. But the more consistent you can be with your workout in every single way, the exercise order, the exercises you're using, the sets and reps, the better you're going to be able to gauge progress.
Yeah, totally agreed. It makes sense. And thank you for clarifying that. I meant like phase to phase of training and in changing the order of things, not workout to workout. That was a good clarification. That definitely shouldn't, in an ideal world, you shouldn't be doing. Now, if you're in a busy commercial gym and you're going there at, you know, 6 o'clock in the evening, yeah, there's going to be times where you're going to have to mix and match things, but you shouldn't be putting your squats just like randomly third in your in your workout. Can you talk a little bit about how you structure workouts then? And like again, there's obviously no right answer to this, but in general, how do you go about thinking about these things?
Yeah, I like what you just touched on. I think the beginning, when you're young and you're really ambitious and you want to get strong, like squats for me, that always came first. I wanted to go in and go as heavy as possible. As you get older and you've accrued some injuries, some wear and tear, and some mileage, you come around to the idea of, well, maybe I should put squats third in the workout after I've done some leg curls, leg extensions. I want to be a little pre-exhausted before I go into them, so I don't have to use as much a weight, and take some pressure off my lower back. That's definitely a consideration for older people and people who've been training for a long time. But you still want to think about strength and progressive overload and seeing progress, but you measure it in different ways with different exercises. And you've got to consider about, joint health and, where does this exercise, where should I place it on my program if I want to continue to do it? And honestly, I've gotten away from a lot of that. I don't really do the barbell lifts at all anymore, and I'm a much happier man for it.
Did you notice that some of these guys that you were talking about before, Arnold, Hulk Hogan, like you were probably interviewing them not when they were, I mean, obviously not when they were like 20. So did they talk about their workouts at the time when you knew them and interviewed them and spent some time with them much different when they then versus when they were in their prime? Did they have these also same kind of realizations like, hey, yeah, I just like don't do that anymore because it hurts my elbow when I do that, not because it's like right or wrong?
Yeah, obviously I wasn't interviewing them in the 80s in their prime. So yeah, they were already pretty old men by the time I got to them. But yeah, I think the common thread you find with these guys is they train faster, they do shorter rest periods, much lighter weights, higher reps. Arnold does everything in like a circuit now. I have had friends who have trained with him personally, and they say, I don't mean to. I'm not saying this to put him down, but on the lat pull down, he'll go up to like one or two plates. Like he does, he goes trains very very light, very high reps, goes to the pump. And Hulk Hogan said the same thing to me, and I think that's just a natural kind of progression a lot of older guys get into to save their joints. I don't think that's necessarily the best way to train. I think you can be that age and have injuries and still go heavy. I think you have to rely on smarter exercises. Now you're getting into machines more, or dumbbells, or you have to, find alternatives like a landmine press. I think is a great exercise. That's something where you can it's a shoulder friendlier version of an overhead press or an incline press that I think you can load up pretty good. You don't have to do super high reps with it, but it'll never tax your lower back or your shoulder joints like a strict overhead press would. Yeah, there's little tricks like that, hacks and workarounds that you can find that allow you to keep staying in that that really fruitful, I think 5 to 10 or so rep range without, having to, kind of go the circuit curves kind of training route and take a lot of what I think you and I would consider the fun out of training.
You referenced this earlier, and I think this is super relevant to what you just said, where people confuse, people just observing fitness stuff on the internet. They will see something like that, an old man Arnold doing, high reps and kind of like low rest periods and like not training to failure, and be like, oh, because it feels good on my shoulders. And it's like, yeah, because he's was the best bodybuilder ever, and he did all the things that he did, and he's old now. You 27-year-old who's like trying to get really jacked, like probably shouldn't be doing that, because that's not what he was doing when he was 27 years old and trying to get really jacked. And like, yes, the machines will feel nicer on your joints and feel better and not hurt as much, but it's also because they're just generally like easier, less fatigue inducing, right? Less balance, quote unquote, needed. They're more stable. And so that's one of the benefits of them. But I think people also end up training way less hard in this effort to like feel good. And well, that's fine. Like training shouldn't cause your injuries and these things. But if you're trying to get like strong and jacked, it also shouldn't really tickle. Like it's not supposed to feel like amazing every time you hit a squat or a deadlift or a bench press. Like you shouldn't just feel like you did nothing. You should feel like something happened there. And if you're not, I think that maybe this is where we're getting into some of these like too heavy on the machines and stuff that feels good. Like what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're touching on the most important point of lifting, which is really the intensity. I think that
Mm.
the science has shown now that there are studies pitting free weights against machines, and they've really found there isn't much of any difference in the results that you get for muscle and strength. It's really, as long as you apply intensity to it, you can do a circuit workout, you can do machines, you can do the so-called frou-frou exercises that Arnold wouldn't have touched in his prime, and still get great results if you were taking your sets very close to failure, if you're really busting your ass and putting in the effort. So that's the most important thing. I'm pretty agnostic about exercises these days. If you want to do something that's a little unconventional, or it's not the so-called most manly exercise ever, as long as you're pushing it really really hard, you should be able to see some results for it if we're talking about gaining muscle.
Right. And that's the exact great differentiator, is the intensity that you apply to it. And I think that it's easier to get up to a higher intensity on like the your squats, your deadlifts, your bench pressing, because the exercise is just inherently harder for like the same load or equated load, whereas people go to the machines but then they still don't train hard. And so it would be fine if you're like taking that to failure and like really grinding it out, but you're not doing that anyways. And so then you're just doing yourself more of a disservice. And this is what I see more and more often. I'm not sure if you've seen the same in gyms
Yeah,
where
I
you
think
train.
that's a good point, and that's the mistake. I think the beauty of machines is they allow you to train harder, right? So you should take
Right.
advantage of that. You don't have to stabilize your whole body like you do when you're in a squat or a deadlift. You don't have to worry about all these different moving parts. You lock yourself into a certain position, and you should be able to go all out. There's no reason not to take leg extensions and leg curls to total failure if you have the heart to do it, because you can do that safely without worrying about dropping the bar and losing your
Mhm.
balance. So yeah, machines, I think they have this rep for being kind of the softer way of exercising, but it's really quite the opposite. And if you go back and look at Arthur Jones and Mike Menser and those early hit guys, like you mentioned earlier, they were big advocates of machines just for that reason.
Yeah, it always comes back to you and how much you can like rip into that machine, which is a lot because the safety is like so high. It would be pretty hard to hurt yourself on most machines, I think. Like I can't really think of one that would have like a high degree of injury risk, and certainly way lower than like any of the big barbell lifts or lifting heavy dumbbells, right? Like there's not really an injury risk there. So but you have to push it hard, right? Which is a learned skill as well.
Yeah, I mean, some machines are better than others. You have to go in and experiment and see how it
Sure.
feels for you. And I know I'm a taller guy. I'm 6'4" and I have really long arms. And a lot of machines, like I'm just too tall for a lot of
Mhm.
machines. They feel super awkward. So I've had to play around a lot with positioning. But yeah, the average guy doesn't have to worry about that. And it's still, for somebody who's newer to exercise too, the learning curve is so much less with machines than it is with free weights. It's really something that shouldn't be as I guess demonized or vilified as it has been. They're a great tool, and we shouldn't be thinking of them as non-functional or like a wussy kind of way out.
If you were training a brand new beginner, never worked out, would you start using machines, or would you start using free weights or body weight movements? How would you start with this person?
That's a good question. I mean, years ago, I would have certainly said, body weights and barbells first. You got to earn the right and develop the movement skills and learn how to stabilize your body. And I still think there's a lot of value to that. But, who's this person you're training? Is it an older guy? Is it somebody who's starting at the age of 60? Maybe he doesn't need to, touch a barbell at all at that point. If he just wants to be generally fit, I might have him on a leg press and leg extension right away. I don't think there's any real problem with that. Again, I think this idea of learning this, training the stabilizers is a little bit overrated. If you're doing
Mhm.
a lot of different exercises that cover the whole body and you're very consistent with it and you're getting stronger, even if they're on machines, it's not like you're gonna walk down the street and fall apart to pieces because you don't have any stability. It's like you're still going to train the muscles that you need to be functional in daily life, pretty much no matter how you choose to lift weights.
Yeah, it was always a funny thing to me, even just like learning anatomy. Is like, we talk about the stabilizer muscles. You want to train them, and you look at anatomy, and I had the chance to be in cadaver labs and stuff in school, and it's like, well, where are the stabilizer muscles? Like, I don't, I don't, I don't see them. We just have like quadriceps and biceps, and like, there's no, I don't like talk about all these little muscles inside your, like, that doesn't exist. Like, it's more of um, a neurological thing than training like some specific tiny little muscles that are somehow so important but yet non-existent and you can't see. So that was always like a funny one to me. But it's like, yeah, there's certainly value in both, and always dependent on the client, right? It's like, give the person what they need, and then you can build from there.
Absolutely.
Let's switch gears a little bit to nutrition, because nutrition is probably more complex than the lifting side of things. What are some of the simplistic things that you have picked up from yourself and from all the people that you've interviewed and worked with over the years that make nutrition as simple as possible for you?
Yeah, I think nutrition has to be as simple as possible. I mean, I started out with macros and counting calories and being super scientific about it. And, like you, I think I'm about as dedicated to this stuff as you can be. And even I burned out on that before too long. I could never sustain it for a long time. I think you got to get to the point where you're counting portions and you're using little tricks like drinking water before meals to fill yourself up a little bit beforehand, where you're just focusing on getting as much protein into a meal as you can and limiting yourself to a 3 meals a day and maybe a snack or two. Little hacks like that, super simple to remember. Anybody can do it, anybody can figure it out. It's not complicated. And you find once you get to, even on the most elite levels, that's what most of these guys are doing most of the time, unless they're right in, prepping for a contest to go on stage. Most bodybuilders aren't counting their calories year round. They're just getting a general idea of it, because anything more complicated than that will just drive you insane.
Were any of these guys that you spent time with, any celebrities or elite fitness people, were they ever like annoying about nutrition, again, outside of if they were just about to get into a competition? Or if you ate with them, were they just like, they ate normal? I think people have this idea that, fitness people, quote unquote, will just like, oh, you never eat pizza, you never eat this. But it's like, spend some time with us. It's pretty pretty normal.
Yeah, I think you posted something about that the other day. About I don't. People always feel like I'm going to shame them if they tell me that I eat bad food. Like, no, trainers are people too. Like, we get it. We eat pizza. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I had lunch with Arnold one time many years ago, and he had a huge plate of pasta. I don't think there was a gram of protein in the whole meal. He had a big plate of pasta with spaghetti sauce. Like tomato sauce on top, and he was not concerned about his macros at that meal. And I think that unless he's getting ready to make a movie, or if he was going to make some comeback to the Olympia stage, he wouldn't be overly concerned about that stuff. So you have to allow yourself those loopholes. And another practical nutrition hack I like is, if you eat really heavy in one meal, if you had a lot of calories or fat in one meal, just try to balance it in the next one. Have a lighter meal. Have a salad or just some lean protein, and go lighter on the carbs and fats. And if you do that enough times over the course of a week, it'll probably average out in your favor.
Do you think that there's good value in counting calories and macros and kind of being a little bit more meticulous about nutrition for a period of time?
For sure there is, and I've done it many times. And again, if you're in the competitive side of things and you want to take your physique as far as you can, there's going to be a point where you have to do that. But it's just not sustainable, even for the most disciplined people, on a long enough timeline. So you do better to do that for maybe 3 months out of the year if you're really into it, and then the other 9 just get into the habit of eating healthy at every meal and kind of spreading things out and monitoring your protein. I would say that's the most important thing if you're going to track anything. Have a general idea of how many grams of protein you're getting in a day.
How do you then go about transitioning from that? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's like, hey, I'm measuring and counting and weighing every single thing, and then I'm going to just not and kind of like, free ball it. And you very quickly slip and back into some bad habits. So, do you have any strategies around like transitioning from being very meticulous to being, more free, but still staying on track?
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of one or the other for a lot of people, isn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah,
unfortunately.
I think that just like I said, I still try to keep track of how much protein I'm eating, and I still try to keep the rule of, well, I'm only going to eat at meal times and maybe have one snack throughout the day, and I'm gonna, I like the portion technique of a palm size of protein at every meal, 1 to 3 of those, and then 1 to 2 fist sizes of carbs. You can't go totally off the rails, but I always try to observe some rules, but they have to be super flexible to the point where you're not thinking about it a whole lot. You should be able to go in, to a restaurant and be able to look at a menu and visualize, well, this is about what this, how much protein and carbs this meal is going to have based on what I'm reading in the description. So I'll order this over something else. And when you're making food for yourself, you got to be able to eyeball things a little bit.
The limiting snacks is something that I've been like hammering on for a while, because I think this is where, I've seen it with my clients, and I'm sure you've seen it with people as well, is like, this is where people slip up the most. Like, if you cook most of your meals or like have a home cooked meal, it's like, it's pretty hard to go like really wrong with that. Like, you'd have to be like going out of your way. Like, I don't know anyone who's like deep frying, like making real French fries in their house. Like, I don't know who's doing that. If you're cooking food at home, it's like probably pretty fine. But then the snacks is when you're having the chips and the junk and the stuff that's just like, tasty and it's all fine and good. But it's way too easy to overeat those. And if you were counting your calories, you wouldn't, because you don't want to put in, you don't want to type in your MyFitnessPal and put in a bag of Doritos every single day. Like, you don't want to see that. So maybe that's where the counting comes in, is just like the accountability, but really just limiting the snacks seems to be in and of itself just like a massive benefit.
Absolutely, and it's funny because we are such a snack culture. I mean, everything,
Yeah.
vending machines and everywhere you go, I'll have some of this, have one of these, and people tell themselves, "Oh, I'm just having, one cupcake or, one handful of chips at this party, whatever." And you just don't realize how much that adds up. And I think one of the harsher rules of nutrition, but a very good one, is kind of what you were saying. Like, you eat at your meals, your 3 meals a day, and the rest of the day the kitchen is closed. You just if you see it, it will get eaten. So get that stuff off of your countertops, get it out of your kitchen, get it as far away from yourself as possible. I tell people, if you're going to have cookies or a pizza, make that something that you have to go out for a treat. Make that, work that you have to put in to get to that food. If it's too easily available, you're absolutely going to, go haywire and indulge in it. So yeah, it's a tough thing for people to accept because we love our snacks, but you don't realize how many calories that adds to your day until you're up 5 pounds on the scale.
Yeah. Another thing that I'll add to that, and I certainly try to like live by this as much as I can. I mean, I don't, let me qualify that. I don't try to. It's just how it happens for me. And maybe it's years of practice. Maybe it's just how I am. I don't know. But when you don't have like those snacks often, you don't have them around, and you do what you were just saying, Sean, where you have to go out to get it. It's like, I'm going to have a good one. If I'm going to go have pizza, I'm not going to order like whatever's just fastest or have a frozen pizza. Like, I'm never going to eat that, because it's not necessarily like healthy or nutritious, good for macros, all that stuff. And it's not even that good. Versus, once a month or once in whatever, I can go out to a restaurant to like get a really good slice of pizza or a whole pizza and have it and enjoy it. And it's amazing. And it's like a 10 out of 10 experience when I have it, versus having these like kind of shitty snacks just more frequently. I don't even think we really enjoy it. It's like this minor, quick little dopamine hit, but you don't sit there and like savor your potato chips. I don't know anyone who's doing that. You're just munching them because they're in your face, rather than go out, get the best one that you can find, enjoy it like 1,000%, and then you'll be satisfied, and then you can move on with your life. And I think that's a big, like, it's just a big disconnect. I think people are not even enjoying it and just having it. It's an unfortunate thing. Very difficult to fix this, so to speak. So it's, I get it, but I think that we have to go back to like trying to savor these treat foods and not just having them all the time.
Yes, and it's funny how often laziness wins out. If you do
Mm.
have to go out and get that snack or get that pizza, So many times you're not going to do it,
Right.
which is great because then you won't end up eating it and you won't throw off your diet. You won't take in more calories than you need. But yeah, if you make it difficult for yourself, even if your cravings are really intense, most people, I think most of the time, they just won't end up getting off their ass and going out and doing that. So that's a good thing. It's discipline by default.
Mhm. Are you a fan of meal prepping then for the same reason, like engineering laziness, but in reverse in the positive aspect?
I think it's very individual. Some people can meal prep and get into the habit of it, and they do it every Sunday afternoon, and they love it, and that helps them stay on track. Other people just can't be consistent with it. I've never really been that consistent with it. I buy all the food that I need in a week that I know is healthy, that it's going to keep me on track with my nutrition. But I usually make meals, each day at a time. I can't really seem to get ahead of the game. So, so for some people that might be overwhelming and it's too much organization. For some people it isn't. But I think as long as you stick with those portion sizing guidelines and you make sure you're only surrounding yourself with good food that you enjoy eating, that you can be consistent with, that's the most important thing.
The classic "it depends" answer. That is always the correct answer, but like not the most not the most fun one.
Yeah, I wish I could be more of a fitness dictator, but I think you and I have been around too long to say, well, this is the way it has to be for everybody.
Yeah, it's like if that was the case, we wouldn't need to continue to have these conversations, and everyone would be walking around super jacked. And
Well, if that
that's just
was the
not the case.
case, people wouldn't need us. They would just go on Google or AI and figure out whatever the simplest, most aggregate answer is. But you and I realize there's a lot more nuance and individuality involved.
What do you think about how AI is going to change fitness, if at all?
Yeah, I think I'm going to do a post on this for myself soon and address that. I think well, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's a great starting point. It'll give you probably all the information you ever really need within seconds. But again, how to apply that? It's a lot harder. It's easier said than done. Like AI will give you a good overview of everything, but one person's individual needs cannot be met by AI, at least not yet. You're going to have to do a lot of sifting and a lot of trial and error to figure out what really works for you and what you can stick with. And there's nothing that's going to save you that time.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, I think that people who are like not in fitness maybe say like, oh, it's going to replace this, that, and the other thing, not realizing that literally all of the information is already organized and freely available on the internet. Like we are putting it out here. Like this is all you need to know. Like you can find out all the things. It's not like we're not in a AI can only give you more information, and we already have all of the information that we need. It's about how to apply it. And so until it can like, show up at your door and go through your pantry and throw out all your cookies for you, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the devil is in the details. You can get a good overview of anything with the internet, but you have to, when it comes down to really applying it to your life, it's going to depend a lot on your personality and what you respond to.
Yeah, and just knowing um how to ask questions with it, right? Like I don't know how much you've played around with it. I've played around with a few of them, like just having conversations about different things. And I can get into a much more detailed conversation with it about fitness and nutrition because I have what I would describe as an extensive knowledge base of those topics, and so I can ask it probing questions and know when it's not maybe not wrong, but like not correct totally. But if I ask it about something else, like I don't even know anything about that subject, so I'm just going to take it for face value, and it may or may not even be applicable to what I'm actually trying to get at. Like the question that I asked might not even be the right question, and I think that someone with no fitness background, which is no fault of their own, would run into the same issues. Is like you're not even asking the right questions, and again, not because you don't know, it's just because those are the words you chose, and AI spit you out an answer, but might not even be helpful to you.
Right. And remember, AI is pulling from the sum of what's out there. Whatever most people are saying about a particular topic is what it's going to probably present you with first. And you and I both well know that some of the most prevailing voices in our industry are not the best, most accurate ones. I mean, there's a lot of terrible misinformation out there that is completely mainstream.
That's why I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong here. I bet that's probably a big reason of why you're stepping, as you said, kind of like out of the background into kind of the forefront now. Is like we've referenced it a couple times here, but we don't need more information. But there's too much now, that there's so much misinformation that like we need to keep putting out good, sound, quality information just to combat the nonsense out there. And it's I don't know, it's just really unfortunate. I think about this far too often, and it actually just makes me sad.
Yeah, well, I admit it, much to my shame, that I was a part of that machine to some degree for a long time. I mean, I had my name on articles and certainly in magazines that had outrageous headlines that were designed to sell magazines and draw attention. And we made crazy promises. And even when I was much younger and more naive, I was always like, oh, gee, I don't know how I feel about that. That's a little over the top, and this seems a little misleading. But I like what I'm doing now because I'm not accountable to anybody but the people anymore, and I don't have to, please the CEO, and I can finally get into conversations like I'm having with you now, where we can discuss some of the nuance and the individuality of it and really help people. And I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's tough because we still do need to combat, and more and more and more as social media continues to evolve, is just like the attention economy. And so an attention grabbing headline is necessary. I don't know if that's too strong of a word, but necessary to a degree, just to get people to click and read. And then inside will be, inside the podcast, inside the YouTube video, inside the article, there's going to be some sound information. But most people don't, most people stop at the stop at the headlines. It's like, oh, well, I don't know. I'm struggling to think of a bad example right now, but like, such and such food, eat apples and it'll reduce your belly fat by 75%. It's like, well, probably not.
Yeah, but I think also, without try not to be too cynical here, I think some of the best people in our industry also have massive followings, and there are people who do discuss the
Mhm.
details about things like Mike Russell and uh, Brett Contreras, and these are guys who don't necessarily make huge blanket statements about things. They get into the nitty gritty, and they still have big followings. Maybe not as much as the latest influencer who's just shaking her booty into the camera, but they have big followings. And I do think in long term, the cream rises to the top, and the best people are the ones who are still doing it years and years later.
I agree with you. I very much agree. There's plenty of good stuff out there. You just got to be able to sift through it. You had a couple stories that you wanted to share about Arnold and some of these people. Can you tell me what those were?
Yeah, I'll try to be succinct, but I had some fun times with these guys. I mean, so Arnold was obviously he's been tied in with the Weider magazines and Muscle and Fitness for many years, and he had a column in the magazine when I was there that I was his ghostwriter for, and I got a chance to spend a fair amount of time with him over a couple of years, and it kind of culminated with me going to his house for his birthday party. I don't know how dirty we can get on this podcast, but
Say
I'll
whatever
push
you
the
want.
limits. You edit it out if you feel like it's too much. So I went to his house for his 69th birthday, and I went up to him and I said, "Wow, so 69 today, right? Wow, congratulations, happy birthday!" And he said to me, "Yeah, 69. That's going to be the theme of the evening." And he winked. So I have little anecdotes like that about a lot of people. Some of them I should probably keep to myself. But yeah, he's an interesting guy, and another thing that he said to me, which I know he said in a lot of interviews, is about the vision in life. Always have a vision. This is something that might actually help people. You don't know necessarily how you're going to get there when you start, but if you know what you want it to look like, if you know what the dream is, then the how-to materials will reveal themselves over time.
That's a very interesting one. How do you think that you've applied that since you learned that from him? Like what are some of the things that you've personally taken from some of these high performing people?
I mean, the vision thing I'm applying right now. Like, look, I'm new to this, the whole fitness influencing thing. I'm not a slick marketer by any means. You look at my content and you can see that pretty clearly. But I have this vision of helping people and how I want it to be ultimately. And it's propelling me day to day. And I've gained a lot of momentum in the last few weeks, and I'm excited about that. And I just, like we were saying before, like I know now the kind of information that I want to bring. I know what my philosophy is. I know it works from so many years of trial and failure that I have a much clearer idea of what to do and how to apply it, and how not just to apply it to myself anymore, but how to help other people with different needs and different perspectives.
Yeah, I think it's almost like maybe it's just a numbers game. If there's just enough of us who are the quote unquote good people, just kind of putting out, balance, kind of even keel information, and like, hey, it's not extreme on this side, not extreme on that side, somewhere in the middle, and it's like not super slick marketing. But if there's enough people just saying that stuff, then it will continue to. I mean, obviously we're all helping people, but like we want to help more and more and more people, and we can't have like a million clients, but we can give information to millions of people. So maybe it's just that. Maybe it's just a numbers game. It's just a matter of us kind of getting ahead of trends and getting behind things. Like trends are always going to come and go, and I don't know if there's anything that you see that or anything that you can foresee that you maybe think is coming. But even if you do, you probably you'll know better than me. That's like, hey, this will be a thing for 6 months, and then it'll just stop because that's how they all go.
Well, I think we're seeing a revival in kind of classic bodybuilding now, going back to our conversation earlier. I see a lot more people kind of being embracing the idea of using machines again. And, everybody's talking about progressive overload now. I remember when I started in this industry, it was a lot about, hitting muscles from different angles and mixing it up and, muscle confusion. That was the big, buzzword. And we've kind of, and there's still a lot of that, of course, and there always will be. But I think a lot of smarter people, more sincere fitness seekers, are going back toward the sort of those tried and true methods of let me just get on a program, basic exercises, try to get stronger over time. There's more of a market for that than there's been in a long time, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think so as well. I fear that it's just like our silo of the internet, and it's like my own echo chamber and our own echo chamber, that we would interact with that content. I see a piece like someone's post that's like, do these 7 exercises to hit all these different angles and all this muscle confusion. Like I'm just swiping past that. Like it doesn't interest me, and so I don't see it. So my algorithm doesn't feed it to me. But I see someone's post who's talking about like this, balanced, nuanced take of something. I'm like, yeah, I'll double tap that. I'll like that. I'll watch the post, and so then my algorithm will just feed me more of that. I fear that we see those things more because we like it, and other people who are not fitness nerds don't appreciate or like those things, and then so they're just seeing the other things. And so I don't know how to evaluate this from like a bird's eye view, getting out of my own lens or out of my own head of what's happening in the fitness world. I don't know. Do you ever think about that, or is it just me? Am I alone here?
I think it's all evolution of consciousness. I mean, when we were young, I'm sure you and I got taken in by a lot of the same scams and myths. And if you stick with it, if you have a sincere desire to get better at this, you eventually weed through that and you find the right people and you find the right audience. And I just think that's always a cycle of things. Yeah, people are going to get duped and they'll make their mistakes and get hurt for it, but they'll get smarter, and over time they'll find the right way. And maybe we are living in a silo, but you jump from one silo to another, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a good take. Definitely more positive than mine. But just before we start to wrap up here, what were some of the biggest like mistakes or dupes or things that you fell for early on, if you can remember any?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, the program hopping was a big one. That was dumb. I mean, I think that it came from just being in the magazines where we had to come up with a new workout every month. I was always like looking for new methods and new shiny keys and I was very sincere about it. I wanted to test all these things myself before I wrote about them or while I was writing about them. So I jumped around a lot from thing to thing. When looking back now, I should have just picked 5 exercises and worked and getting really strong at them, and I should have just focused on eating a lot of protein and not eating so much crap, and I would have stayed leaner. So that's a big one. And I think the just kind of being open minded in general, like maybe this contradicts what I was just saying, but we used to think there was a time where it was like all West Side training. That was how you got strong, or it was all bodybuilding training, or all functional training, or kettlebells or no kettlebells. Like you've got to learn to kind of take a little bit of all these different things. The Bruce Lee philosophy of absorb everything and discard what's useless and figure it out for yourself. You got to be open to all the different ideas out there, because there's something to be learned from everybody, no matter how weird they may seem on the surface. And when you apply the best principles from each different faction, then you've got a real training system.
Yeah, I like that. So given those two things that you just said, and I think this only applies because of your job and the career that you've gone on to have, do you regret that like program hopping stuff that you did early on?
Yes, I mean, I
Oh,
guess it was good in the sense that I got to try a lot of different things. If I just done one thing for 10 years, I wouldn't have learned a whole lot. But I mean,
yeah.
it certainly set me back personally in terms of my gains.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair. I guess where I was going with that is like, because this all the mistakes that I made, I would say like, yeah, going back, I wouldn't do that again if I could. But at the same time, like, because this is my profession, I learned a lot from those things and now can speak to it the same way you can. But like the selfish answer is like, yeah, I would have had way more gains if I just didn't do that dumb stuff. But
No,
the
you're
more
right.
like real answer is like, hey, I learned a lot of stuff and can pass it on from that, right?
Yeah, the bigger picture view of it is that yeah, it's good that like anything in life, you want to make mistakes when you're young, and the what is that expression that the road to excess leads to the palace of wisdom.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one, but that's a good one. Yeah. But it's like the other side of it is when you're young enough, like kind of doing anything will like you still made progress. You would have just made more progress if you were a little bit more dialed in.
That's true too.
Yeah. Very good, man. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today? Anything else that you wanted to touch on or get out there?
No, I just want to say that thank you for having me on. I think like we're definitely aligned in our values, and we're trying to help a lot of the same people. So let's stay in touch and keep the team going. And people can find me at fitnessdistilled.com, or my name SeanHyson.com, Hyson. Same name as all. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, pretty easy to find there. And I'm putting out content right now for regular people who want to get the best results for gaining muscle and losing fat with the least amount of time and effort. Like, I'm cutting through all the extraneous stuff, all the showboat stuff, and giving you the basics of how this is done, so you don't have to waste time and effort and money like I was saying that I did for so many years.
Yeah, very good. And I can definitely attest to that in the time since we've connected, and your content is very much like to the point. Here's what you need to know. Here's some actionable tips. And that's that. If you're looking for, people shaking their butt and giving you the latest flashy item, this is not for you, but I highly doubt that you listen to this entire podcast if that is you anyways. So, follow Sean at Sean Hyson, and on all the platforms, basically you're on everything, fitnessdistilled.com. And again, I'll put the links in the show notes as I always do. But Sean, thank you very much for being here. Is there any last words you want to leave the people with here in closing?
No, thank you, Daniel, and everybody. Train hard, be smart.
Love it. Nothing better than that. Sean Hyson, everybody, thank you very much. Follow us both. Like, share, subscribe to the podcast. Spread the good word. All of those nice and good things. Go outside. Be a good person. See you next time.